one of the biggest lessons we learned, or I learned the hard way, was we knew we weren't going to get all of our restaurants open for October 2022, and I thought we'll be fine. We'll put some pop-ups in. We have some restaurants on the riverfront. We'll be fine, and we weren't fine. The power station was completely derelict. Roof was off, a hollow shell of a building. Construction had just begun on the first phase, which is called Circus West Village, and that sits immediately next to the power station. But otherwise, it was a shell. Our marketing team very, very proactive on social media, and I think the power station is that perfect. It's very Instagrammable. It's the perfect backdrop. So from campaigns, product launches, activations, people love it.
Today on the People Property Place podcast, I'm joined by Sam Cotton, Head of Asset Management and Leasing at Battersea Power Station. Sam has responsibility for all retail, leisure, office and meanwhile components of the live 42-acre, £8 billion power station estate. He joined the business in 2015 and led on the curation of the occupier mix from masterplan inception, delivery of the pre-letting campaign through to public launch in October 2022, taking BPS from a former derelict industrial site to a best-in-class, fully let, mixed-use London estate. Prior to joining BPS in 2015, Sam held roles at Capco, Henderson Global Investors, and started his career at Savills. So Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Well, look, it's probably about a year ago, you very kindly gave me a tour around Battersea Power
That's right.
Station.
I remember well.
And what a job you and your team
I
have
think
done.
we were still sort of recovering from the opening at that point in time. So yeah, I think we were pretty tired then, but I remember it well.
You've done a fascinating job there. And
Thank you.
as part of this conversation, I'm really keen to kind of unpack the story
Sure.
and what you and the team have done in terms of kind of delivering that. But before we get onto that, a place I always like to start these conversations is how and why did you get into real estate?
Sure. Well, yeah, happy to share. So real estate, an interesting one because I've, as a kid, I was fascinated by property, fascinated by things, places. I grew up on a farm up in Derbyshire. So, land, buildings, they were a part of life. And what do you do with them? And I guess as all good farmers, you've got to try and extract whatever you can out of all spaces. So as a kid, that was a early fascination and interest, but I didn't really know how to get into property. I didn't know what it was as a career. It didn't really mean much to me apart from estate agency and houses. So that was my understanding. I didn't really understand commercial property, but I guess I was at school geography, and we were following the Docklands and Canary Wharf and the early days of redevelopment of East London, and that was just fascinating, captivated me and my interests, and I just thought how incredible to be able to change a part of a city. So that sort of sparked the imagination, and then certainly triggered the want to move to London, but I still didn't know how to jump into the industry.
And you didn't have any family or friends?
No one in the industry, farming background, farming family. So no one was a property professional by background. So I just pursued, carried on with school, went to Oxford Brookes, but doing geography and politics.
Keep your options
Keep my options broad. Geography was interesting subject. I enjoyed it. But it was at Brookes that I realised then that there was such a thing as real estate courses, accreditations. So I very quickly realised I was on the wrong course. But enjoyed geography, enjoyed politics, but needed to, learn my trade, I guess, learn what to do. So did some work experience in the summers, worked at some local rural practices, really enjoyed that. I thought this is really interesting, but I was doing some work at a company called Brown & Co up in Grantham, which was brilliant. Really enjoyed it, but I didn't want to live in Grantham at that time. Nothing wrong with Grantham, but I wanted to move to London. So did that for the summers, and then joined the masters up at Sheffield Hallam after I qualified at Brookes. So yeah, that was my route through education.
And did you have anyone advising you, or was it just a case of get some internships, follow your nose?
Not
and
really.
try and work
My
out?
dad was farmer, land agent, we use Brown and Co. Have a chat with these guys, and I'm sure you could learn something. So that's what I did, and that one really opened the doors to me. So yeah, learned a lot and loved it. And then joined the property appraisal and management postgrad up at Sheffield Hallam. A great year, 2007. So yes,
world falling apart.
Exactly. Exactly.
Did you have any kind of second thoughts or regrets, or thinking, is this going to be the end of the property world, and it's going to be over before I've even started?
Sort of, but equally there was 20 of us on the course, so there was a small number of us. Got to know everyone really, really well, and it was really fun. And I realised, having not probably enjoyed my undergrad so much, that postgrad I really enjoyed it and treated it like a job. And yeah, all of a sudden I was getting good grades and I was learning something. So treated it like a job, really, really enjoyed it. But yes, it was very much reading the news every single week, realising this might not be such a great time to get a job on the other side.
Growing up, what type of kid were you? Were you particularly academic, sporty?
Yeah, neither really. Definitely not academic. Loved going to school and enjoyed all of that, but I wouldn't say I was by any means an academic high achiever. So it was really refreshing for me, and I really enjoyed actually learning and that practical application of what we were doing. That was the first time I'd ever had that, so I loved it.
So the ability to be curious about a subject matter and then kind of realise that applying it, you're actually quite good at it, and you could progress further. So you did your masters at Sheffield Hallam.
I did.
And then you landed at Savills, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Was that a challenging job to land in August 2008?
Yeah, it was. I mean, my first day at Savills was the day Lehman's collapsed, which was that was really interesting. But to get the job at Savills was pretty tough because and there was 20 odd of us on this masters. Everyone was very competitive because everyone was obviously trying to compete to get into all the same grad schemes. And I went through all of them, had lots of interviews, did a lot of the assessments, dreaded assessment centres, all-day assessment centres. I remember the DTZ one; it was terrifying, but was unsuccessful through those approaches. It was tough times. So I thought, well, and at that time, a lot of my peers on the course were just resigning to the fact there might not be any jobs. We're going to go and do something else or go travelling. I was determined. I really wanted the job. So I just wrote independently to all the HR directors at all of the different agencies, but I went to all of the regional offices as well as London, and I got an interview at Savills in Birmingham. So Birmingham isn't where I expected to be, but Birmingham, I got a job in Birmingham and I took it, and it was a great move. Really, really glad I made it.
And so what team did you land in at Savills?
Vals, so
valuation.
Commercial valuation. Yeah,
and I guess I wasn't in the industry at that stage, but I've spoken to enough people who were. I guess a lot of the funds and the property companies at that stage were moving from quarterly valuations to monthly, if not bi-weekly.
Absolutely.
And so there's probably a real need just to kind of get in and help row the boat faster in that particular team.
It was a huge learning curve. I mean, bear in mind, first job straight in, but it was a lot of distressed valuations, bank valuations in terms of huge amounts of repossessions at that point in time, going through, we were Birmingham, so covering all the West Midlands from sheds, shops to office blocks to care homes it was very, very, very diverse, but learned a huge amount in pretty short period of time, really.
And did you rotate at that stage and get kind of broader experience, or did you just stay in the valuation space?
Did valuations for first big chunk of my time at Savills, and then developments, property management. I remember development was fascinating because the development team there in Birmingham were fantastic. I remember I had to measure the Middleport Potteries building in Stoke-on-Trent, which was, again, I think in receivership at the time. But, grad standing there with a tape measure trying to measure an old potteries building, that was a definite learning experience.
At this stage, you'd been working for a couple of years, got your letters.
Yeah.
Had you kind of pinned down which part of real estate you wanted to progress in at that stage, or was it a case of still fact-finding?
I was fact-finding. I was really enjoying commercial. Was definitely my my route. I was really enjoying that because there's obviously big residential side to Savills as well, but I was really interested in commercial, qualified in it. And one area that kept coming up and through portfolios was retail. So we were doing a lot of work for then Tesco's portfolio, Credit Suisse, Aviva. So I was getting stuck into retail, and I really enjoyed that. And I thought I'd quite like to learn a little bit more about this. But there wasn't really a retail team at Savills at that point in time, and not in Birmingham. And the other thing, I really wanted to move to London. So it was, okay, how do I get a job in retail? How do I move to London? And it'd be quite nice to do some travelling as well. So that sort of spearheaded the next move, really.
So you moved to Henderson Global Investors,
Yep.
which is a kind of precursor to New Veen as
Exactly.
people will know it today. What was that role, and how did that come about, and what did you do?
That role was I would call it perfect luck. It was brilliant. I wanted to do all of these things, and got a phone call one day. Would you like to move to London, join a pan-European retail fund? It involves lots of travel, and you'll be working with a really great fund manager. So it was almost a perfect job description, which I absolutely jumped at, and went for it from 2011, something like that.
So you moved to London,
Yep.
and then straight on a plane. What was the kind of the portfolio? And
It was fascinating because it was it was a €1 billion portfolio, predominantly purchased. The fund was coming towards the end of its life when I was there. So 2011, we were Euro crisis still very much going on in those days. So it was across France, Spain, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, Greece. Greece was fascinating at that point in time. So yeah, I think 2 days in, straight down to Spain, then Belgium, Switzerland. It was amazing. It was exactly what I wanted.
And in terms of retail, I guess is the blanket name in terms of the asset. Like, what were the actual asset classes? Was it shopping centres, prime? Was it high street? Was it out of town? Was it shopping centres?
Bits of everything, really. So shopping centres, retail parks, out of town, but I really loved the retail parks. There was two. The portfolio had been managed very hands-off. It had been managed through local property management teams, really, across Europe. So I could see very quickly there's quite a lot on the table here. It wouldn't take too much just to
improve
make
and drive
some
the
changes. Value. Absolutely. And the ones that I absolutely loved it was a retail park in Belgium and a couple of retail parks in Switzerland. And I spent some time on the ground, got to know the tenants, in Europe, local mayors, how to change planning consents, reconfigure some units, get some new lettings through, bit of a refurb. And all of a sudden I could see the tangibility in valuations, and that was really exciting. So that sort of spurred my interest in that further.
Was that a valuation experience at Savills? Did that stand you in good stead when you moved to the principal side? Because you could then try and work like materially in terms of how I move the dial and how that is going to principally affect values?
Definitely. And I think understanding the principles of valuation was really important. The other part, though, I think was really understanding retail and understanding how you grow it. But the big learning piece when I was at Henderson was lease structures, because in Europe, particularly in retail, it was predominantly 3-3-3. There's no such thing as any more than a 3-year term certain.
So what does 3-3-3 mean?
Sorry, talking in code. So tenants would have 3 yearly breaks. So you couldn't do it. There's no other way of structuring around that. It would be 3-year, 3-year, 3-year.
So you would lock them in.
terms.
So would the lease be 9 years, but there'd be breaks
Correct.
at 3-3-3?
Correct. So very different to the UK at that time, probably more similar now.
Which would be
But
more like 15-year leases,
Back
5-year
then,
only?
Back then, probably, yes. I mean, nothing like that now, but yes, in those days. So learning all of that, indexation, no such thing as rent reviews. So everything was mostly indexed.
So it went up with our RPI.
RPI or CPI, yeah. And then learning turnover, retailer margins. Again, that was very transparent in those days, much more now so in the UK. But in Europe, it was so far ahead in terms of that data sharing. So I learned a lot.
And why is that important to understand? I guess turnover, is that so you can do turnover rents and you can structure things in different ways?
Absolutely, turnover rents, but also just understanding the health. Is it working? good weeks, bad weeks. How do certain pitches, how's a certain part of a portfolio comparing to another? Is there room for growth? It's just the perfect tool to understand how, living health really of a scheme. So I learned the importance of that from Henderson, which stood me in really good stead for everything I've done since. It's that turnover piece has been.
And
crucial.
in terms of Henderson, the fund, was it one fund you worked on, or was
Yes.
it multiple different
No, it was on one fund.
So it was just one fund?
One fund, yeah.
Fine. And
Yeah.
did you, as well as that, did you kind of learn from like a fund management perspective, exposure, risk, tenants, because you must have had some good tenants with some good covenants, and
Yeah.
you wanted to kind of take them to other assets, but
Yeah.
you didn't want to be overly weighted in terms of overly exposed in case there was an issue. Did that kind of factor in? And
Definitely did. And it was understanding the ability, particularly with big groups, that you can do deals across a continent. You can talk about something in France that you're doing in Belgium, that you're doing in Sweden. So that I learned the importance of that. And investor days, understanding, explaining the nuances of what's happening on the ground to investors who are, all they would see as a fund fact sheet, and all of a sudden sort of transferring what's happening on the day-to-day to the fund fact sheet. People found that really interesting, and I learned a lot about how important it was to take investors who don't understand the day-to-day on those journeys.
did you get bored of the travel?
No, I loved it.
The
Absolutely loved
novelty didn't wear off. The 5 a.m. flights.
it. 5 a.m. flights, it's pretty tiring, but I loved it. It was great. It was really fun.
You moved from Henderson to Capco, so you
Yep.
went from a broad pan-European role
Yeah.
to a very, siloed, geographically focused central London estate or
Fixed.
estates. Fixed, exactly.
Exactly.
Talk to me about why and why you decided to do that.
Well, I really enjoyed Henderson, really enjoyed the European side, but I was very conscious. I was living in London, but I wasn't really. I was on planes all the time, or going through Eurostars. So I wanted to properly enjoy London, and I wanted to get some London experience as well. So you couldn't get any more central than Covent Garden, and the opportunity to join Capco as it was then on the Covent Garden estate at a really exciting time when we were acquiring buildings, trying to build up the streets, and really reposition Covent Garden. It was a hugely exciting time, so I jumped at that, and very glad I did.
Very different occupier mix and mindset, surely, going from out of town retail
Yep.
to prime. I
Yep.
don't know if it's super prime, but taking a view in terms of the curation of that mix as well.
Completely different. So it's such a difference. But I learned a lot. There's a great mentor there, Sarah Jane Curtis. She was the director of Covent Garden when I joined, and learned a lot from her about retail in particular, and about the importance of London estates. I didn't really understand the concept of London estates. So
For someone listening to this who doesn't understand the concept, do share.
Explain, of course. So London estates, there are many of them across London, and what we try to do at Battersea is to emulate them to an extent, but it's having control or ownership of a certain area. So streetscapes, landscaping, public realm, all the buildings are under one ownership. So you can really curate a place, and the value comes from that curation because people know that there's proper stewardship behind it. You can control the mix and bring in the right balance of mixes and uses for the collective benefit of the entire area. And if you've got residential, office, retail, restaurants, it's the balance of that mix and portfolio that helps all the values, the tide rise together, I guess.
And also, I guess, just it's a slightly different mindset from have to take a very long-term view when you're making decisions,
Totally.
rather than when you're in a bit more of a fund and
Yeah.
it's maybe a 3, 5, maybe 7
Completely
year
different.
cycle, where you're in and out, as it were. Here, surely, there's lots of different moving parts, and you might do what's deemed as a bad or not a bad, maybe a commercially not as attractive deal, but actually that's going to have an impact on another part of the estate, and there's a wider plan and strategy there.
Absolutely, and that's what I found the most interesting, and that you do take a long-term view because it's not being sold. It's there for for however long. So it's exactly that. It's getting the mix right, the right occupier, the right building, the right development, the right changes that they might not benefit you tomorrow or next year or over 3 years, but yeah, valuations 5-10 years, it could be a very different position. And what does that one little move here make to this part of the portfolio? So that was really interesting.
Who are some of the stakeholders that you would have to bring on the journey? Is it the councils? Is it the local occupiers? Is it the residents? Who are these groups or individuals when you're an asset manager that you need to be mindful of when you're curating these destinations?
In somewhere like Covent Garden, very much residents. You've got very long-term residents there who've got a real passion for the area and want to know what's happening. Local authority, council, whether that's things to do with black cabs going through Covent Garden, for example, very controversial decision for some, but pedestrianising Covent Garden, I'm sure, would be welcomed by others. Those sorts of things, it's those stakeholders that you've got to engage with, as well as the tenants and the operators themselves. So everyone's got a business and they want to succeed.
And I guess that relationship's really important with those occupiers, building and understanding what they want, where they want to go, how their business is doing. What advice would you give to someone who wants to try and get closer to their occupier, build a closer relationship, and understand what their plans are?
It's the most important thing. You've just got to spend time with them, go and have coffee, go meet them, have a coffee, sit and have a chat. You can really understand the pinch points, pain points of their business. What are they? What works for them? What doesn't work for them? And you learn so much. And those little learnings, particularly if it's someone running a retail or leisure premises on the ground, they will tell you more about your portfolio than anyone else will. They'll know the flows of footfall. They'll know the customer base. They'll see differences in people's spending power quicker than anyone else. So I think that's it's the really brilliant anecdotal piece that you can get back from the ground.
You were at Capco for a couple of years before moving to an even smaller location. You've kind of gone from Birmingham to Europe to Covent Garden to another single site. Lots of people would have been to Battersea Power Station. A lot of people listening won't have been.
Sure.
And they might have only seen pictures of it or heard about it. Can you just paint a bit of a picture of what is Battersea Power Station and what was the opportunity when you got on board? Sure.
So Battersea Power Station, a huge London landmark, former coal-fired power station on the southern side of central London on the river. I joined the project in 2015, but a project that had a massively checkered history. Derelict building, many failed development attempts to bring it back to life. It was decommissioned early 1980s, 1982. Several owners, several different master plans from 8-story shopping centres, theme parks, Chelsea Football Club, you name it. So many different development proposals. But the owners that purchased it, that I work for now, the shareholders, they purchased it in 2012, a consortium of Malaysian investors, to bring about a 42-acre master plan, 8 million square feet, half residential, half commercial, with the power station at its heart. And I joined in 2015. It was just, I couldn't not get involved with that. It was, I'd go past it all the time on the train, would fly above it into Heathrow, just intrigued by this colossal building and wondering what could you do with that. So it was really intriguing to jump straight in 2015.
So Malaysian consortium had bought it 3 years earlier.
Yes.
Had they rejigged the planning, had they, and repurposed or created a new vision for what they wanted to do?
There was an existing master plan, a Raphael Vanoli master plan that had been envisioned, and that was then tweaked and changed and evolved, and by the time 2015 came when I joined, that was fully consented or outlined consent for future phases, and it was all about delivery, making sure we're delivering the right thing. And of course, what you write on a piece of paper at one point in time through to when it's delivered, the world changes. So big process.
And so at what stage was the project when you entered in 2015?
It was very early. So the power station was completely derelict. Roof was off, a hollow shell of a building. Construction had just begun on the first phase, which is called Circus West Village, and that sits immediately next to the power station. But otherwise, it was a shell. So really an incredible time to join, because I knew nothing about construction, knew nothing really about development. So it was a properly steep learning curve, and I thought I'd probably bitten off slightly more than I could chew the moment I arrived.
So you joined head of retail leasing, and there was a shell of a building with a long time horizon until it was fit for purpose.
Correct.
And you could get occupiers in.
Correct.
So what were you doing?
I mean, a huge, quite a few mistakes, to be honest, Matt, at the beginning, because I thought it was really easy. It was just like being, in Covent Garden. You just, draw a plan, turn up, ask someone if they want to open a shop, and I realised there's a whole lot of more work to do here. So this was 2015. Power station didn't open until 2022. And it was a huge process to go through in terms of understanding what's going to be viable, how can we make this place work from a logistical perspective, but through to also a monetary and value perspective. What we had a development appraisal to meet and achieve, and of course that was only going one way every single year with construction. So it was all about balance throughout, and having to take shareholders on that journey, and all the time looking at probably deteriorating markets whilst we were trying to do this. From certainly from a retail office perspective, things weren't getting better, they were getting more challenging.
Yeah, because 2014, 2015 was probably the peak of
I'd say
retail.
I'd say so.
And then, I think, so if I cast my mind back then, the emergence of residential or student accommodation or the kind of alternative sectors started coming through as a bit of a mainstay, and shopping centres and retail were really
went the other way,
really falling off a cliff.
Absolutely. But we knew we had a huge residential component to the power station, and we were already selling the residential off plan, so that was all already underway. But
that would give a return or give capital to be able to deliver those particular parts of the scheme.
Correct. So those residential sales supported the early days of development and construction. So absolutely vital. But also we knew that to make Battersea a place, to make it successful, we needed uses. We needed other uses to bring people there. It was a fundamental part of not only the planning consents, but the viability of the entire scheme. So
because you would look at other shopping centres and they would be waning because they were just let to cornerstone retail, anchored retail, but it wasn't necessarily exciting or diverse or drive footfall.
Well, it was looking at certainly some of the shopping centres, but that probably wasn't what we were trying to do. We were trying to, I think it was probably more of the London estates background, thinking, okay, well, the last big estate to be created from scratch in London was probably Canary Wharf. That's taken 20, 30 years to come to life, but look at it, it's transformed an entire side of London. There's not really that much west, in terms of the far west and southwest, nothing really. So that was the opportunity. And with 42 acres of ownership, that river frontage, residential, we knew we had the support of a new Zone 1 tube station coming in. So albeit it was going to be a long time until it was delivered.
Was that the Northern Line extension?
Northern Line extension, yes.
And that must have been critical. Because otherwise it's just a barren piece of land still.
Exactly.
With
and
industrial
there was no
use.
line bikes then either. So it would have been really tough. But we knew the Northern Line was committed and that was underway, but it didn't open until 2021. So we still had a lot of convincing to do that was going to happen, it was going to arrive, and people really took some time to believe that. But we knew it would come and we knew it would happen, and bringing in retail, leisure, hospitality was key to selling apartments and to leasing the office space, because those occupiers wanted to know that they were going to have an activated, interesting ground floor. The whole thing feeds each other.
It's flywheel, self-perpetuates.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I guess for the people buying flats, they're thinking about exit in the future and creating value off the back of doing so as well. So you were part of the team just in terms of defining the strategy.
Yeah.
When did the first retailers start coming into the kind of the project, and on what basis?
Well, we opened the first part of the project in 2017. So Circus West Village, which is a building immediately next to the power station, we opened that 2017. And the idea there was really to create a village. So we have almost 900 apartments upstairs, fully sold. They were going to be fully occupied in 2017, but we knew people needed, bread. They wanted to go down the ground floor and do their shopping. So we opened a general store, and that was the first tenant to open at Battersea Power Station was the Battersea General Store, complete independent trader, but a brilliant retailer.
Did you have to
help
was
out?
Was that a big bet
Yes.
to kind of get them
Huge
to come
bet.
on them and you, I guess?
Everyone. Huge, massive risk. Because, well, it was a huge risk, but it wasn't at the same time because M&S, Tesco, they wouldn't come. There was no footfall. So there was no footfall, there's no tube station. You might have opened sold some apartments, but there was no pedestrian access. So it didn't really mean much to the big operators. But we knew if we were going to create this village, we needed to find a real pure specialist, and we found one. And yeah, lots of shared risk. We supported on the fit outs, and the deal terms were a fair share of that risk in the early days. But that's it's a brilliant performing store, and it performs for both of us, so it works. And it's you share the risk and you share the reward.
And that partnership,
Totally.
I guess kick-started once you've got one occupier signed up.
Exactly. Then you can start to tell the story and bring people on the journey. So we started with a general store. We opened a pub, hair salon, florist, some restaurants, and it
Pharmacy,
really
just
really
sort of
builds.
local.
Exactly. But it's when you're working with independents and small operators, it's brilliant for the ground floor. It creates a beautiful mix, and it's exactly what we wanted to deliver. But it's hard because people don't have access to funding. Fit out is expensive and complicated. So we found ourselves doing a lot of hand holding, and we knew that was going to be the case. But it was a big learning curve for me again, working with independents.
Quick one from me. If you haven't already subscribed or followed this show on the podcast or app where you listen or watch, please do. It takes 10 seconds and helps tremendously. I've got really big plans for the People, Property, Place podcast, and that one small action really helps grow the show and the presence and enables us to keep doing what we're doing. So if you haven't already, please follow or like on the platform you watch or listen to. Thanks so much. And in terms of like the lease lengths, what kind of lease length were you signing? Because you'd probably want some control. Yes, you wanted to help them, set them up for success, but also you probably wanted to kick them out quite quickly if they weren't performing or they weren't accretive, or other people wanted to come in on better terms.
Sure. I think what we did, we structured those terms with a fair share of risk and reward. So in the early days when we knew there wasn't going to be much footfall, there was no tube before the power station would open, we did very much revenue share transactions, and that worked for both parties. And then those leases rebase over time as the development matures. So,
Talk to me about the evolution in the next phase, and how many phases are there? Because
several. We're halfway through.
I was going to say, you're
through.
halfway through the project.
Yeah, halfway. We've got live about 2 million square feet. There's another 2 million live commercial square feet to go, more residential to go in with outline consent. But we opened the power station October 22. So that was the biggest piece.
That's the main bit, right?
It's the main bit, and certainly the biggest commercial piece. There's only 253 apartments in the power station. It's predominantly commercial building. So we've got Apple's UK HQ in there, which is 500,000 square feet. Phenomenal, beautiful office space. And that lease was signed in 2016. So that was a really crucial letting for Battersea. It set the I think the commercial awareness that Battersea is going to happen. I think before that deal was signed and announced, it was a nice idea, but perhaps people didn't quite believe it was going to happen.
And also conviction for the types of occupiers that it would attract.
Absolutely.
And I guess you get a cornerstone occupier like that.
Yes.
Other people are going to
really
take
helps.
notice.
And I think if if Apple have done their due diligence, then that's a good sign. So I think that gave the wider market an enormous amount of confidence. But it was still 2016. They only moved in last year. That's how long it takes. It's a big lag.
So you signed Apple up as kind of the first commercial occupier for the wider power station itself. What was the strategy or thought process in terms of bringing up other occupiers and activating it and curating the space too?
I think Apple was signed 2016. And I cannot claim that transaction, sadly. But some former colleagues definitely can. But that deal really helped create the story, and from then we could really hang our hat off the fact that Battersea was going to become a commercial destination. It was going to become a future office destination, and from there on, we mapped out our approach. We actually ripped up all of the previous plans and strategies and pieces of paper that we'd been working on for years because they weren't relevant. We needed to look again, and I think that's something we've done every single year. Is whatever you write as your business plan, particularly in retail and leisure, it changes 12 months later. It's very, very different. So it made us sense check and test all of our previous assumptions.
Did you was the power station built or opened in particular phases? Or was it a case of the development finished, opened, and you had to kind of let all the space at the same time? Like, how did you go around opening the building?
With great difficulty. We had to open October 22. That was we'd written the date, we'd drawn the line, and it had to happen. And we'd booked in the opening party. Do things back to front. Let's book the party, and then we'll work out how we're going to open it. But we did that. So we had no choice. But trying to open 100 odd shops and restaurants at once. You've got office space fitting out. You have residents moving in. It is a big undertaking, especially when you only have. It's a big site, but you've got many people accessing it. So we did that. It was an unbelievable undertaking by many people, and people worked solidly day and night for a very long period of time. But we got it open. We didn't get as much open as we wanted to, but we got the majority of the power station open, which we were very pleased with. But one of the biggest lessons we learned, or I learned the hard way, was we knew we weren't going to get all of our restaurants open for October 2022, and I thought we'll be fine. We'll put some pop-ups in. We have some restaurants on the riverfront. We'll be fine. And we weren't fine. We did not have anywhere near enough hospitality for the number of people that were turning up. So that was a big mistake.
What would you have done differently? You'd have reduced the retail offering and improved the restaurant.
It was purely it was a factor of fit out. It was a factor of logistics and just getting in the number of opening a restaurant. And particularly we have a very large food hall in the power station with arcade, 23,000 square feet, 13 kitchens, phenomenal operation. But the fit out and opening that was so big that it was. In hindsight, it was impossible to try and line it up as one. So if we could rewind, we would have done it in a different way, get the hospitality open at the same time as the retail, and let it have its big bang. But that didn't happen.
How does one go around segmenting and working out where to place retail versus leisure, where the prime spots are, the rents, the zonage, you know, and who you want to try and and then curate. Do you have a strategy in terms of who you want in there as well, or is it a case of working really closely with occupational agents who are specialists, who've got the relationships and advising you on that curation?
I think a bit of everything, Matt. So we knew we wanted certain uses, we knew we wanted certain brands, certain occupiers, but it's how can we one, convince them to come? I always knew that the likes of Nike, Lululemon would do brilliantly at Battersea Power Station, but they said no for 5 years consistently. They said no every approach we made, and so it was persistence, and I think explaining the data side of it, that's been crucial. It's understanding who the customer base is, who the demographic base is, what data we can obtain from the people living within the surrounds and sharing that data with those occupiers really helped. And then we started to be taken seriously, and then the journey builds.
Data is embedded in Battersea Power Station, right? Can you just talk to me about the different data points that you collect and how you go about doing that and how that informs your strategy as well?
We're really fortunate because we've been able to build it from scratch. We've been able to put it in from the outset, which I think I learned the importance of collecting the data a long time back from the Henderson days. That was pretty rudimental in terms of just turnover data, but we had the collection. I was really surprised when I joined Capco that you didn't really have much in and I think that's still the case in central London. So we were able to capture it from the outside, build that into all of our models, capture daily sales. We have cameras across the estate in terms of monitoring, live monitoring, foot flows, captures people in and out. We monitor. We can capture different postcode data. We understand our international visitor platform, and we've got apps across all of our occupiers, so residents, office, retail. So
like tap in, where people are using, or
so we absolutely that people can share share knowledge, share data from a conversation platforms from the residential side, but equally all of those user groups can have access to the offers, the promotions across the estate. That gives us an enormous amount of insight. So it helps shape our knowledge of how we plan marketing, how we budget for events, what we should be doing for the next calendar year, and that helps us business plan and forecast for the future.
Because you're getting that live data and you can make better informed decisions.
Exactly.
And do it with more conviction and confidence.
Yep.
And if you spend X or do Y,
Yeah.
this would be the likely return off the back of it. And then I guess it self-perpetuates. And then
exactly that.
It's really powerful when you're going to Nike and saying, don't just take our word for it.
Exactly.
People lie, but the data doesn't.
Exactly. And we can share that. And also when we want to ask our shareholders for contributions to marketing budgets and putting on events, we need to be able to show what works, and if we want to bring a particular audience down, this does work. So
the ROI on it.
Exactly.
So what does work?
What does work? At Battersea?
Yeah, like what are some of the events that you've seen that the data backs up that works, and how do you activate? Because it's all well and good doing that, but it's about activation, isn't it, and getting people through. Like what does work when it comes to that?
People love events. I think that's really easy one, but events are expensive. So when we knew as a new destination, we've got to build our audience, and that will take some investment and time to build up. So we did plan a couple of hero events, which would require investment, and we try and then hang the year off those events. So summer games, which are live right now. So Wimbledon fan zones. We've got one of the Olympic fan zones for Team GB launching this summer. Those sorts of things really help cement Battersea as a place and a neighbourhood. But then it's partnerships, partnering with, we partnered with Apple last Christmas, for example, and with David Hockney, this fantastic Christmas tree installation on the front of the power station. Those are the sorts of things we try to do, and just to create little bits of magic and give people a reason to visit, and hopefully they'll come again, and that builds up our audience.
You've also got paddle courts.
We have pop up at the moment, but the main ones will open in a couple of weeks.
Really?
Yeah, really looking forward to that.
So the main power station opens as a percentage of the acreage or the lettable area. How much of a percentage is that in comparison to the estate? It's
the predominant commercial part of the estate. So it's the predominant commercial part. There's over 1 million square feet of commercial space in the power station. The remainder of the estate is very much residential mix with commercial ground floors. We've got a hotel, and we've just recently this year launched a new 200,000 square foot office building, which we're live leasing right now, Foster & Partners building. So that's really exciting because it's our first new office product. So it was great to take that to market, and that's underway right now.
What are the types of occupiers from an office perspective that are down there that are choosing that as a destination to be based? You obviously touched on Apple, but who are the other kind of occupiers or types of industries that are kind of gathering down there?
Really mixed, and I think that's been the fascinating journey with Battersea. Is we thought we would be sector specific, but we're not at all. It's really quite broad. But Shark Ninja's our second biggest office occupier, so they've been in the power station they took some space in the power station
And what did they do?
a couple of years ago. So you'll definitely know Shark Ninja. So kitchen appliances, Shark Ninja vacuum cleaners. They actually sell more than Dyson.
Oh wow!
So more vacuums in the UK than
Maybe
Dyson.
why he's cutting 1,000.
Well, I did see that.
Staff.
I did see that. Yes, but Shark Ninja have just taken some more space at Battersea. So they've just taken 30,000 square feet in the new 50 Electric Boulevard building. In addition to their current space, and then we've got a couple more in legals at the moment, which we'll announce shortly.
So it's kind of tech occupiers.
Tech, we've got media, we've got the engine room, which is a co-working space operated by IWG. So it's a really mixed space.
And in terms of the kind of the retail and leisure occupier base, is that a mix of national, global, recognised brands, but also kind of niche independents as well? And how do you go about curating that balance between sticky occupiers to drive footfall, but also making sure that it's fresh and forward thinking, and you're kind of getting hot brands in over other kind of competing destinations?
No, absolutely. We still try to manage the whole estate as an estate. So keeping the village very much independent, power station, some big brands, but equally some complete independence, one-off brands in the power station too, and then some bigger footfall drivers, the likes of Zara, Uniqlo, for example, which are critical to the mix in there as well. And I think it's all about balance. And since we've opened the doors, we know what we're overweight in and what we're underweight in, and what we need to change and evolve as the power station matures. And it's that constant monitoring that will enable us to ensure it's got a really successful long-term future. And I think that's the point earlier on in the conversation about London estates, is that's the philosophy we're putting onto Battersea. It's a long-term view.
It's a stewardship.
It's absolutely that word. And we know what we might do here will help us here. Bringing the paddle courts onto the front of the power station, that brings a whole new audience in, and how does that impact our restaurants? And it's just connecting all of those little pieces up.
Instagram,
exactly.
Footfall,
totally.
social media impact.
Absolutely.
Does that? Have you seen Instagram, TikTok, social platforms have a big bearing on footfall and the types of types of individuals or customers that come down?
Hugely. I mean, our marketing team very, very proactive on social media, and I think the power station is that perfect. It's very Instagrammable. It's the perfect backdrop. So from campaigns, product launches, activations, people love it because you can be very, very creative, and that's again the beauty of having control of a whole place, is you can do those things, and we don't have to go and get permission. It's for us to say yes or no, and that's really fun.
How is your team? Because you joined as head of retail leasing, and you've been head of leasing and then head of asset management. Yep. How's your team and how's your role evolved during that period?
Sure. So, I mean, leasing was a full huge part of it for the bulk of my time in the early years. So it was pre-letting, getting everything full, going through the leasing process. Working
with the development team who are delivering.
Absolutely. So hand in hand, development team, delivery team, understanding, moving that wall there. Well, that's going to cost $100,000. So okay, move it. Let's not move that wall. Making all of those sorts of decisions to hopefully land at something that is viable. So going through that process, and then making the transition from really leasing to asset manager. As we got closer to completion of the development.
So, what for someone listening to this who is going, what's the difference between leasing and asset management, or what part, or where does leasing fit into asset management, or that kind of slight shift? Can you just explain or elaborate on on that?
Well, I think they go hand in hand, and I think the best way is doing it hand in hand, because leasing is bringing in those transactions. It's deal curation, origination. It's bringing occupiers in, physically transacting in terms of documenting those leases, signing them up, and in some instances that at that point in time the leasing people would just walk away, but that's not how we've done it. We've gone all the way through. So I still have all the relationships with the majority of people at Battersea who I've done the deals with, and that helps shape how they operate, how they occupy. Do you want more space? How can we help with this? It's the beauty of having an estate that you can go from leasing to asset managing to then ensuring that the long-term viability of the project is maximized. So looking for those upsize opportunities. Can you re-gear a lease? Can you remove someone that's not working and bring someone else in? It's spotting those opportunities early. So it's a slightly different wearing of a hat, but I think they go very, very hand in hand.
You touched on a little bit about brands and getting people to like believe in the project and getting a couple of anchor names in there, which kind of helps make it easier for others to come. But there's quite a lot of competition in London, other estates, other destinations. How do you compete and how do you reconcile that?
It's I think one of the biggest challenges was firstly convincing people it was actually going to happen, because I still have people that don't believe the tube is operational. I have to literally get them on it. So we had plenty of naysayers that said it wouldn't happen. So that was the biggest challenge. In terms of convincing people to come in, it was data crucial and convincing and showing that very clear business case. 80% of the spend in Wandsworth as a borough, which is where we are, disappears from the borough, or was disappearing from the borough. So it was leaving. So there's a clear business case there to open and bring in more certainly retail and leisure. And then the office piece, it was hanging off our main anchor tenant and demonstrating that they've done their due diligence. This must be a fine and viable location. So it's been many strands, but I think just convincing, talking, engaging with the market, and we've had some work with some brilliant agents across the market, and I think it's been great to see people come on the journey with us. So yes.
Do you see the other estates and developments as competition, or do you collaborate with them and it's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats situation, or is it a case of you're obviously trying to get ahead and get your lead occupier in if there's a competition?
Sure.
To do so? How do you deal with that?
I think we're arguably the newer kids on the block. But I think everything it's for the good of London, right? I think it's the rising tide. If you look at all corners of London, you've got these fantastic estates and developments, and I think it's for the benefit of London that these things exist. And I really enjoy it when we have international visitors coming across, particularly international developers, investors, landlords that are really fascinated about bringing these big land parcels together in London and creating these mixed use projects. So I think Battersea is a brilliant example of that. Of course, there's always a bit of healthy competition, but I think again that's for the good of everyone as everyone looks to
up their game.
Yeah.
In terms of being an asset manager and being a leasing manager, what are the core traits, or what are the things that distinguish a high performing one compared to someone who's maybe not cut out for it, or not a high performing operator within that particular niche of real estate?
Sure. I think you've got to have a passion for your product. I think that's key. I think that goes to any industry, any sector. You've got to really believe and have a passion for it in your sector, and really understanding it. You've got to take your time to understand it, know your components, but from an asset management perspective, particularly whatever the sector is, know your end user, because your end user is going to determine your success. And if you don't understand who is engaging with your product and how they're engaging with your product, how are you going to maximize its value and return? So I've always found it interesting when people are incredibly hands-off, because I think you need to be actually quite hands-on, and being more hands-on gives you a really thorough understanding of what works and what doesn't, so you can make those changes.
And is that your customer, but also your customer's customer, in terms of that whole ecosystem of
Exactly.
who's actually going to be going out for...
Yeah, who is our customer? And we debate this all the time. Is our customer, is it a resident? Is Apple our customer? Is the person that's in one of our restaurants a customer? They're all customers. Who's coming? Is someone coming to a free event a customer? They're all customers. But you have to engage with them in a very different way. But you've also got to ensure that they all have a brilliant occupier experience or visitor experience, because if they don't, they might not come back, and they might not spend any money, and they might not say that space is worthy of them, or whatever it may be. So really identifying who they are and how you engage with the different people is really crucial for, I think, real estate in general, because that is our job. It's a physical environment. Everyone must engage with it.
So kind of asset managers becoming more marketeers or understanding of market, brand, sales, engagement, retention. And I think
it's the operational side, which I think is really interesting. We've got a couple of operational businesses within Battersea. And so, for example, a Lift 109 visitor attraction, that's not a lease, it's we manage it. That's a whole different way and strand of running a component of the real estate, and it makes you think differently. And I think that's a key part of asset management.
What do the next kind of 12, 18 months have? What's next 12 and 18 months for you and the wider Battersea team? What does that look like?
It's maturing. It's so Power Station will have its second anniversary in October this year. We've got lots more to open inside, outside, and around it. We're really looking forward to the new office building, 50 Electric Boulevard, that filling up and everyone getting fitted out and operational and bringing more people onto the estate. We're opening, or TfL are opening another entrance exit for the Northern Line on our high street. So really looking forward to that opening next year. And just seeing the estate mature and learning or putting into practice the lessons we've already learnt. And hopefully seeing the place evolve and grow further, really. There's
a lot of development down there as well, outside of Battersea too, right? I guess a lot of people have kind of latched onto the project and are building or developing or investing in the local area, which only can have a positive impact.
It's excellent. Too. It's really good. Yeah, lots of residential, some more office space. The office location is really building, which is great. For Osmo along the road from us, so really brilliant to see that now completed, and it's great because all the time with the tube station now in, it's that critical mass of the area building. It's, when I started, you couldn't buy a coffee. You had to walk to the petrol station to buy a coffee or a sandwich, and it was not very nice. And now you've got a whole community and place to hang out. So very much different.
As we draw to a close, the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast is, if I gave you £500 million worth of capital, who are the people, what property and which place would you look to deploy that capital?
That's a fun game. I'd love it.
Probably wouldn't go very far, just in terms of the size and scale of your project and what you're used to.
It wouldn't go very far, no. But I definitely want to create or build something rather than buy something. Hospitality, operational, I think there's a big opportunity with tourism in the UK and Northern Europe. I'd be looking at doing something creative, probably going back to my roots, doing something rural actually.
Oh really?
Yeah, rural hotels, boutiques, up around the UK, because we're undersupplied. If you look at the number of people that are now holidaying in Northern Europe rather than Southern Europe, Northern France, big opportunities there. I think hospitality and hotels I'd be looking at quite closely.
So Northern Europe, hospitality, experiential led. And is there any individuals that you kind of worked with along your career that you'd bring along in terms of the journey, in terms of building out a new platform?
Lots of people. Yeah. Lots of people, let's
press you for some names.
I've learned a lot from some really great people, and I'm sure I tap them up for some advice if I was doing something else.
Well, Sam, like I said at the top of this conversation, what you and the team have done at Battersea is absolutely phenomenal. And I urge you, if you're listening to this and you haven't been down, what have you been doing and where have you been living? No excuse if you live in London to not go and see it. But it is absolutely an eye-watering project, and I just loved walking around and being curious about the different parts of it. So you can go and spend an afternoon there and get lost in everything that it's got to offer. And as Sam said, if Wimbledon's still on by the time this comes out, or another sporting event, maybe the Olympics, Paris, you can go and check it out, or go and get your paddle racket out and go and hit some balls. So Sam, thank you for coming in and sharing a little bit about your background, journey, and the work you and the team have been doing at Battersea.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague. Give us a rating, like, or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of guests that we should have on the show, or areas of the market we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit leadership and future leadership hires for real estate owners, funds, investors, and developers. So if you're looking to hire top talent for your business, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you'll be able to find a wealth of information, or feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.